Hello everyone, this is Mrs. Pope here, and we are ready to do the next step in our one-point perspective city drawing that we have been creating. And today we're going to talk color. So earlier you saw a video on value, and value is the light, medium, and dark of a color. When you are creating a one-point perspective or anything in 3D to help create the effect of a realistic photo or the 3D effect, value is a great tool to use and help. So as you see these buildings, again, this is the final product or one final example. On my buildings, at the bottom of the building where we are standing, remember the viewer is down here in an ant's perspective, so the bottom parts of these buildings are really close to us and the top part of these buildings are pretty far away from us. So to help show that these buildings are closer to us and the tops of the buildings are further away, we're going to add some value. At the bottom of the building, if you notice, my green building over here has a light green, and then it goes to a medium green, and then a dark green. There are a couple of different ways that you can add value to show depth or distance. The way that we are going to do it is we are going to make it appear the lighter colors are closer to us and the darker colors are further away from us. And as long as you stick with that same technique, the bottom of the buildings are going to be a light color, the middle of the buildings will be a medium color, the top will be a dark color. It will all appear that they are close to further away. Same thing on the other side of the building, because even though we are saying we're standing right here, this top of the building right here is not actually closer to us, it's further away. The bottom of these buildings are if they are across the street. So the bottom of these buildings are actually closer to us and the top of the buildings are further away, reaching up to the sky pretty far from us. So again, on these side of the buildings, we're going to color them and shade them a lighter color to a medium to a dark. Last class time, we drew our buildings and we added the shade, the black, to the sides of the buildings to help show that that is in a shadow and that is showing more depth. Where we left off is adding details, and I asked you to add some details on your own. So hopefully you did so. Some of you might have said, I'm going to wait a little bit and get a little more help, which is perfectly fine. So I have added details to all of my bottom buildings right here and also to some of my top buildings. I left some of them blank so I can bring you through step by step on adding some details. So I'm going to flip my paper over because it is much easier for me to draw the buildings if I'm able to see them in the correct view according to where I'm sitting. So instead of drawing my buildings upside down, I can draw my buildings as if they are standing right in front of me. And I am going to get my black marker so I'm able to add a few details along with you. Again, I am using the edge of a folder as a ruler. If you have a ruler, please use that. If not, find any straight edge and you can follow along with adding a few details to your building. I'm actually going to leave this building blank. You are allowed to leave some buildings blank, especially if they are super skinny. Sometimes if you add too many details in a small space, it looks crowded and it doesn't look as neat anymore, and it can become very distracting to the person looking at your art. So I'm going to leave this one blank since it's pretty skinny. And I'll go ahead and do these two along with you if you like to follow along, or if you decide, I want to change something and add another detail, that's perfectly fine as well. We have already erased our vanishing point, but even though we erased it, I can still see where my vanishing point is because I drew it a little bit darker, and you might still be able to see that vanishing point as well. When you are drawing, let's say, windows on a building, you still have to follow the same rule as when you built the main part of the buildings. Those lines that go from the bottom of the page all the way up need to go to your vanishing point, just like those edges of your building. The lines that are going to chop off your windows and cut them will need to be parallel to the bottom of your building, just like we did when we cut off the top of the line. When you are creating windows or other details, sometimes you're going to create the entire line for the windows, and sometimes you don't have to create them all the way across. So for this building right here, I wanted to give it an appearance as if this entire front of this building was solid glass and there was a bunch of windows. I will do that same concept right here to show you how it works. All of those lines going up and down lead right back to that vanishing point. So I am going to take my folder that I'm using as the ruler, and I'm lining it up to that vanishing point and just deciding how wide I want those windows to be. When you draw these lines, you don't actually have to draw all the way to the top, all the way to the bottom, because glass reflects in light. So sometimes you don't see a full line, you only see part of a line because it's a really big shine right there. So when you create these lines, I suggest, in order to make it a little more realistic, that you don't actually draw it all the way to the top. And I'm going to turn my folder, still going to the vanishing point, still going to the bottom of the page. It's still inside this building. This time, since I drew this line from the bottom and didn't draw anything at the top, I'm going to draw and add a little bit more to the top and not fully draw down to the bottom. And I kind of do this pattern back and forth, so I don't have a huge blank space ever in my building, and I'm just judging to see how much space I have left. And I'm going to go back over because my folder is not see-through, it's not transparent, so I can't really see how much space I have left. Most of you that have a ruler can kind of see on the other side of the ruler and judge. So I've created all of my up and down lines, all of these lines right here. Again, if I wanted to, I could leave it just like that and leave the detail like this, and it will look perfectly fine. But if we're wanting to add those cross lines to make it appear as if each one of those is a separate rectangular piece of glass, we will need to take our handy dandy trusty ruler or folder, and now we're going to create lines going this way. Now remember, when we create the lines going this way, they need to be parallel to the bottom of the page, and it will also be parallel to your top line. When we create these, another trick to make it look like this building is going up, 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 and up is when you get closer to the top, make those lines closer together. You can really see it in this building right here. This distance right here is much further than these distance. If I was to measure this, it would actually take up several of these little windows. So when you're going and drawing up towards the top of the building to help show distance as going further and further away, we want to draw those lines closer together to make them appear to be going off into the distance. So when we do that, you can either start at the bottom or the top, either way. I'm actually going to start at the top. Since my folder is not transparent, I can't see through it, I want to make sure that my lines are getting further and further apart. And one easy way to do that is to start at the top. Again, you don't have to draw these lines all the way across. You could draw them part of the way across. And then my next section, I want it to be a little bit wider than the section before. And each time I bring my folder down or ruler, I'm going to make that section a little bit bigger, that distance a little bit further apart. And again, I'm not drawing my line all the way across, but I am making sure that if I'm drawing a line on this side, the next time I draw the line on this side, so I don't have too big of an open space. So you're going to kind of go back and forth as you draw these lines. And if you feel more comfortable drawing the line fully across, that is perfectly fine. It will still give you the effect and the appearance that you are wanting. Another detail that you can add is help draw that glare. So if you look at these windows to help represent that they are glass, I added a few lines, and that's going to represent the reflection on a window. You don't have to add a bunch of these lines. You can add just a few lines to make that effect. On my other copy, I'm going to show you again. I did not use a black marker on these. I actually used a gray colored pencil instead. So all of my reflection lines on these windows that I added are with a gray pencil. On this building right here, I decided to color every other window in with a gray pencil. And on these ones, I just did a little bit of gray kind of zigzag on them. I did not fully color them in. And on these, I just added a few lines just to represent that. On this building, I didn't add any at all. And again, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to add the same details on every single building. And in fact, on this building right here, I'm not going to add the reflection lines because when I'm looking at it, those lines made that look pretty busy. That means there's a lot already going on in this building. And if I add more reflection lines, it might be too much. It might be too busy and distracting, so I'm going to leave it. And in fact, I decided I'm going to leave these two as well, and we're just going to add some color to them. So now let's move on to color. When you are coloring, if you do not have color pencils, you may use crowns, or if you are saying, I feel a whole lot more comfortable using crowns instead of color pencils, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to do some of my buildings with color pencils and some with crowns, so you can see that it works with both. But what I would like you to do is go ahead and choose one color pencil that you would like to start with. Whatever color, it honestly does not matter. It could be your favorite color, or it could be a color that reminds you of the season right now. That is fine. So I'm going to start off with a green. And I'm going to go ahead and do this building first so there's not any extra lines so you can really see what I mean by the shading of a building. When you shade a building and when you add value, I like to start with the light first and then continue to add more color to make it darker and darker and darker. And since we are making the bottom of this building light, and then we're going to go to a medium, into a dark, I'm going to color the whole building or almost the whole building with that light color. And when I color with a light color, I like to hold my pencil pretty far back like this. This, even if I squeeze this part of the pencil really tight like most of us do, it helps me apply less pressure to the paper and pencil, which is actually where the amount of color goes onto your paper. If you apply a lot of pressure and press really hard, then your color is going to be darker. If you press softer and barely touch the paper, it's going to make a lighter color, that tint, which is what we're looking for right now. So I'm going to hold my pencil further back when I am coloring right now. And for right now, I'm just going to color this direction just so you can see how I'm holding the pencil further back. Normally, I would color all of mine this way going up. Since it's going from lighter to darker, it's easier for me to color this direction. But the first time, I will go ahead and color this way so you can see how far back I am holding that pencil. And when you are adding color to it, I go pretty quick with my pencil, which also helps me and prevents me from pressing too hard because I'm going super fast. But when I'm coloring and I color this way and hold it this far back, you actually color with more of the side of the pencil instead of the very point of the pencil, which helps gives it a smoother color all over. It helps you get the same even tint or shade that you are looking for. And you're just going to color that whole building a nice soft color, barely touching it. If you accidentally start going too dark, that's okay. I know for almost all of you, this is your first time trying this technique, and I simply just want you to try it out. And in fact, all I'm going to ask you to try it out on is 2 different buildings. If you like to push yourself and continue to do all of them, then please do so. But I would like to see you try this technique on at least 2 of your buildings. So now I have colored it a nice even tint of green. So now we're going to start bringing in a darker. So what I'm going to do is actually switch my direction to this way, and I'm going to start to the dark side because this tint right here, that's as light as I want to go, and I don't want to bring this bottom part any darker. So I'm not even going to add any more color to this bottom part of the building. So I'm going to start to where we want it to be darker. And I am going to press a little bit more, but I'm still not pressing as hard as I can. And you could already see the difference in color value that we are adding to this building. And as I color down this building, again, I'm coloring the on the edge of it, not on the point, coloring on the side of it, I'm going to press less and less and less and less, and I'm not even going to go all the way down to the end. So you can start to see that I'm getting a pretty smooth transition from a darker to the lighter, but I want this to be even darker. In order to do that, I'm going to go back and press even harder right at there at the top. And then I'm going to press lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter and try and keep a smooth transition. A transition means when you go from a dark to a medium or a medium to the light. It's when you start switching into the colors. When I color this direction, in order to get a nice clean line all the way down, I'm actually pressing really light. I'm not pressing hard at all. Even though this is the darker side, I am pressing light just to fill in those little white spaces to make sure that I'm getting a nice even color, and I'm coloring solid. Solid, most people think that solid means you're coloring hard and dark, and that's not true at all. Solid means that you are just covering up the entire space with a new color. So I'm taking away the white and adding a new color to it. So it does not necessarily mean that it is a dark color. And I'm just going to continue that transition on down. And now on this building, I have my shade part of my value, I have some medium values, and I have my tint, my light color. So this building right here can absolutely be done, and I will move on to the next. For the next building, I am going to do, again, I'm going to add value from a dark to the very top to a light, but this time I will do it with a crayon. So those of you that are using a crayon and saying, well, how do you do that? How is that even possible? Well, let me show you. So I'm picking my next color, and I'm going to go ahead and apply it to this building right here again, because this building doesn't have any details. You'll be able to see that transition just a little bit better. And I'm going to start the same way that I started on this one, by adding a light tint over the entire building. And even though this is a crown and a crown isn't as long, I'm still holding it further back to try and apply less pressure to the paper. And the crown, you're going to get a little bit of a darker color with it, because when a crown colors, it's made with wax, and that wax really holds on to that paper. So be very careful when you are coloring with it. Try really hard to press as light as you possibly can, because that crown is going to stick to that paper really quick and add color really fast to it. So again, I'm just adding a nice even tint to the whole thing. Now that I have my tint added, I'm going to go ahead and start adding my shade, my darker side to the value. So I'm going to start at the top, just like I did with this one, because that's the side I want to make darker, and I'm going to try not to touch this bottom part at all. So I'm going to start at the top, and you can already see, look how dark a crown will get, because that wax really sticks to that paper and it really shows a bright color. You can get that same rich color with colored pencils as well. You just have to work with it a little bit more than with a crown. So again, I'm pressing pretty hard at the top of the building, and as I color down the building, I'm going to press less and less and less. Try to get a nice, even, gradual transition from the shade to the tint. And I'm going to lightly color in the sides of these to try and make that a little bit more even when it goes across. And there we go. And if I wanted to, I can bring this dark even further down very easily. It just depends on how much shade you want on your buildings and then how much tint. You can see a pretty big difference on the buildings on my other page. I added a whole lot more. I'm trying to get it to where you can see. This right here is with colored pencil, just like this is. But on this one, you can see I added a lot more shade on this one than I did on the new one that I'm drawing right here. The amount of tint and shade that you add is really up to you. It's preference. There isn't a right or wrong answer. So that is up to you to decide. What I would like you to do is continue coloring these buildings. I want you to at least try doing a value, a dark to a light on 2 of your buildings. If you are saying, Mrs. Pope, this is more than I can handle right now, I really need your help one-on-one with this, that is perfectly fine. You could go ahead and switch to just doing the buildings a nice even color if you choose. I do not want you to add any words through the middle, any signs through the middle. We are going to be adding a sky to your building next class time with a little bit of a tie-dye effect. So for this class time, I would just like you to finish coloring up your buildings, adding the colors that you would like to add to them. If you haven't finished adding some details or designs on your buildings, go ahead and do that first before you add color. And I can't wait to see what all of you have come up with. Bye.